For episode 1 of season 4, we will be featuring various Day of Remembrance, also known as DOR, events in our community. Most, if not all, connect the signing of Executive Order 9066, which led to the forced incarceration of more than 120,000 people of Japanese ancestry during World War II, to contemporary events happening in the United States and inspire us to take action. For our pastry selection, we have a segment highlighting San Jose to learn about their theme and event for this year's DOR. For our salad selection, we take a trip to Sacramento to see how they honor the DOR in 2025. For our chef special, we go to San Francisco to learn about this year's Bay Area DOR. For dessert, we speak to an organizer of the Los Angeles DOR. And of course, stick around to be treated to some news bites of happenings in our Japanese and Japanese American community. And finally, we end the program tonight with tips of events that are coming up in the next month and beyond. So without further delay, let's start the cafe. Now, before we start off our episode, I would like to inform you of the recent passing of Mark Izu, Asian American jazz legend, composer and musician, and bass player. He's actually the one behind the infectious bass line on our theme song for Nichi Bei Café, Anthony Brown's Asian American Orchestra's Rhymes for Children. Our condolences to Brenda Wong Aoki and their family. More on this later in our News Bites segment. So starting off with our pastry selection tonight, we spoke with Nihon Machi Organizing Committee Chairperson Reiko Nakayama and speaker Dr. Alice Yang, professor at UC Santa Cruz, as they talk about their San Jose DOR and theme Women Activists Leading Change. Please enjoy.
The idea of the theme started this summer. We wanted to focus on women activists in our community after we presented last year's Day of Remembrance on youth activism, building community. And it's very inspiring to see so many women in organizations being led by women. It is very inspiring to see so many community organizations being led by women. And it's important to honor the contributions of Asian American women who were active in protests against the forced removal and incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Redress and Reparations movement. And today we see the continuation of activism among youth. So the two themes are sort of tied together. Past activists that come to my mind are, for instance, Yuri Kochiyama, Patsy Mink, Tsu Kunitomi Embry. These were redress activists and civil rights activists. Well, we're excited to have Dr. Alice Yang, a professor and chair of the history department at UC Santa Cruz, and Diana Tsuchida, who created the oral history project Tessaku. We've known Dr. Yang for many years, and she was actually a speaker at one of our past events, and we were just waiting for the right opportunity to ask her to join our program, and I think this is a perfect opportunity and really emphasizes her work. And
so I am the daughter of Korean immigrants. They came before many Asian Americans came in the mid-1960s. They actually came in the 1950s, and they settled in Sacramento. And so I was born and raised in Sacramento. And, you know, I went to college, decided that I was going to study history, thought I would be a lawyer, and then got involved in teaching history at an inner city school in Providence. And that's where I was really confronted with the problematic way in which a lot of history is taught. They had really outdated and frankly racist textbooks. And so I decided I wanted to go and write a textbook that included the history of people of color. So I went to graduate school, and one of my professors told me about an exhibit at the Oakland Museum. This was in 1990, and it was called Strength and Diversity, Japanese American Women. And it was about 3 generations of Japanese American women. And I happened to go on a day when there was a panel where different generations of women talked about their involvement in the redress movement. I had never, heard about women being, involved in this sort of campaign and having such an impact. And they were extraordinarily articulate and moving. And so I went up to them at the end of the panel and I asked if I could speak with them more. I ended up doing a graduate paper, and then they invited me to come to their events. And so they started telling me about their own family incarceration stories, their activism. And then they, in true oral historian fashion, started giving me the names of other people. And it's what we call the snowball effect. And before I knew it, after a couple of years, I had interviewed about 70 people. I just came back from a People's March that was held in Santa Cruz. That was also to celebrate the MLK convocation. And what I want people to remember is that we sadly have been through this before, and that you really should never lose hope. You can become angry. In fact, you can become morally outraged. But if you can remember the people in history that have called out injustice and refused to stand by and done many things, made small acts, large acts, right? There's a wide range of things you can do and say that can make a difference. And I think if you keep that in mind, this can be a period that is not, it is demoralizing, but it can be energizing and empowering too. And so I want to remind the public, and especially, our Asian American communities, that we have a long history of people who have spoken out and been active, and women have often been, both leaders and behind the scenes activists, and especially the Japanese American women who are using that history of the wartime injustice to advocate for the rights of new victims of discrimination. Because sadly, right, that xenophobia and the racial profiling, all of that Japanese Americans experienced during World War II keeps being revived. It comes up in different periods. Sadly, we are living through one such period, and Japanese Americans, and especially Japanese American women, have taken a stand to make sure that someone speaks out and that they try to prevent history from repeating itself.
The event is free and open to the public. Please visit our website, sjnoc.org, for more information.
Thanks to Reiko and Dr. Yang for their time for this segment. If you live in San Jose and neighboring areas, we hope you can attend their event on February 16th. Next up, we speak with Wendy Yamashita, professor at Sacramento State University and committee member of the Northern California Time of Remembrance. Wendy talks about their event as it focuses on Black reparations and restorative justice. Please enjoy, and we hope you find this segment inspiring.
So as a committee, I think for many of us, remembering and honoring Japanese Americans incarcerated past in World War II is to really think about what we can do now in our present moment, right? And so I think every year we kind of ask ourselves, how can we make sure that racism and racial violence doesn't continue to happen like it did to us? And how can we protect the civil rights of other groups? Because we ultimately understand that we are all intricately and intimately connected to one another. So this year's topic is Black reparations and sort of reparative justice. We are thinking about, especially in light of what has happened in 2020, California established the task force, and in 2023, the report done by an extensive amount of research of folks on the task force was published. And so having two of those members, Dr. Grills and Don Tamaki, in conversation with each other, I think is going to be just so fascinating and something that I personally am so excited for. As a community, we're somewhat familiar with what redress and reparations are. And I think we're bringing in this concept of restorative justice as well, and to think through this idea of how do you really repair harm for victims, and really focusing on what does that look like in terms of healing relationships, especially something that has happened generationally, right? It's not just the victim itself, but how it has transpired through generations. So I think, when I think about this event and who it's for, I think it's really for anyone that's interested in learning more about Black reparations. And I think last year our topic was on the model minority, and we have already started this as a committee to really think about the relationship between Japanese Americans and other marginalized groups of color. And so we've been doing that work as a committee for years now. I think we're kind of building off of our previous years. So, last year when we were thinking about the model minority, we're thinking about how it's actually a harmful stereotype that is steeped in anti-Blackness, right? And how does it participate in the structure of violence that Black folks experience in terms of white supremacy, right? So we're already thinking about Black and Asian American, Japanese American relationships in that way. Like I said before, I think our community, we are very familiar with what reparations is and what it can do for a community that has been subject to racial harm, such as incarceration. And so I think we want folks to better understand, this year, those kind of parallels, like continuing that conversation between Black and Japanese American experiences under white supremacy. And I think reparations is a really good comparative project and approach, because it allows for us to understand not just like our similar relationship under white supremacy, right? Because white supremacy doesn't serve anybody, but also like the differences, right? And the nuances between them, and how often problematically the state uses Japanese American success to talk about sort of Black failure, right? And I think this is really a moment for us to understand Black reparations, right? And to be able to imagine that it's not just possible, but like very necessary. And I think this is a larger sort of theme in, the committee's work, but my work on a personal level. I think the only way, and I think this is important now given our political landscape, but the only way to really move forward and challenge white supremacy is to be in solidarity with others. And in order to be in solidarity with others, I think you have to ethically understand your position in the racial landscape, right? So you have to understand both one's privilege and one's experiences of oppression in relation to other groups. So I'm really excited about our two speakers. I just think they have so much expertise. So both Dr. Cheryl Grills and Don Tamaki were appointed to the California Reparations Task Force. So both of them have so much experience and knowledge and understanding of the significance of Black reparations and also the stakes of it. And I think for us as a committee, we were thinking that it would just be so wonderful to have them in conversation with each other because, of course, Don Tamaki is coming from the perspective of being Japanese American, but also coming from, the law, right? And I think Dr. Girls, as a clinical psychologist, is approaching it from a psychological background, especially in community psychology. So I think it's really going to be a fascinating conversation. I think they're going to talk a lot about their experiences on the task force, as well as sort of how their different expertises were brought to the table, but also just like how they are approaching understanding, racialized violence and harm and what can be done in terms of repair and restorative justice. Our event is February 8th, and it will be from 1 to 3 p.m. at the California Museum in Sacramento. You can visit our website, nctor.org, for more information, including sponsorships, and even register for the event. We are really excited, and we hope to see everyone there.
Thanks to Wendy for elaborating on the Northern California Time of Remembrance program, which is organized by several Japanese American Citizens League chapters. If you happen to be in the Sacramento area, please feel free to participate in the event on February 8th. For our chef special, we connect with Jeff Matsuoka, chairperson of the Bay Area Day of Remembrance held here in SF Japantown, and keynote speaker Mike Ishii, Executive Director of Tsuru for Solidarity on the 2025 Bay Area Day of Remembrance. Their theme this year is Carrying the Light for Justice, Neighbors Not Enemies. Please enjoy.
Our Bay Area DOR is one of the oldest DORs in the country. This will be our 46th annual event. And there are various things that, have characterized our DOR over the years. For instance, we have our candle lighting ceremony, which is, of course, a very emotional and evocative memorial to all of the people in our community who were wrongly, unjustly interned during World War II. We have, survivors and their descendants light candles for each of the 10 WRA camps, as well as one candle lighter for the Department of Justice camps, who were mainly used to, of course, intern aliens. Another sort of feature of our DOR is the awarding the Clifford I. Ueda Award. And Dr. Clifford I. Ueda was a San Francisco pediatrician, and he was a former president of the JACL, and he was very instrumental in the whole redress movement. Also, he was a person who was not afraid of taking very controversial positions. Day of Remembrance has awarded the Clifford I. Ueda Award for the last 20 years to a person in our community who we feel exemplifies the courage and also, the vision of Dr. Clifford in seeking justice. Yeah, well, thing is, our theme this year is Bay Area Day of Remembrance, Carrying Light for Justice, Neighbors Not Enemies. And, it was prompted by, in particular, President Trump's declaration during his campaign of threatening to invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 for mass deportation of immigrants. And that kind of struck a chord, I believe, with the committee, since, in fact, the last time the Alien Enemy Acts, or we call it AEA, was invoked was, in fact, against, Japanese Issei during World War II. But in particular, we felt that given our history and given the fact that most of those, in fact, who were charged under the Alien Enemy Act were Japanese Issei, that we had an important role in sort of educating our audience Of course, we also have a keynote speaker, and this year we're very privileged to have Mike Ishii, who is the executive director of Student for Solidarity. And as I mentioned, our theme is neighbors, not enemies. And of course, Tudu, of course, has been really at the forefront of immigration issues.
Well, the theme is a very personal one for me. My family was forcibly removed during World War II from Seattle. My mother was just a young girl at that time, and they were taken to the Minidoka concentration camp in Idaho. And also, my grandfather's sister lived in upstate New York. And on Christmas Eve of 1941, her family was massacred by a gunman, a former World War I veteran, who entered their home and shot them point blank because he wanted to deal with the Jap problem, in his words. That had multi-generational impacts for my family. As the youngest of the family, I witnessed the impacts, and it always struck me as a child that something wasn't right. And all through my young life, my mom was somebody who grew up very poor, was forcibly removed to the camps. And I think she always had a deep sense of you never leave anyone behind. You always reach back, and we bring everyone with us. I'm so glad to get to have the conversation in our community, but also in the Bay Area, given the history here. In terms of the Day of Remembrance program, what I hope to talk about is what is happening in our country right now. The incoming administration is going to enact a massive campaign targeting millions of people. It will destabilize the economy of the country, but on a moral level, they're going to repeat history. They're going to forcibly round up people. They are already surveilling people. They're going to do raids on people's homes and take people out of workplaces. The newest amendment to one of the laws is now saying that they can take children out of schools. They are going to build hundreds and hundreds more detention sites. What we are seeing is, once again, the repetition of history. And the blueprint that was used to surveil, forcibly remove, and mass incarcerate, and in some cases deport in mass people of our community during World War II, is going to be the template for what's coming after January 20th.
Our Bay Area Day of Remembrance will take place on Sunday, February 16th from 1 to 3 p.m. at the AMC Kabuki Theater in Japantown.
A grateful thanks to Jeff and Mike for making themselves available for this segment, and especially Mike, who will be traveling from the East Coast to speak in person at the Bay Area DOR. So if you live in San Francisco and neighboring communities, we hope that you can attend on February 16th. Now, just a reminder, you can read in-depth articles about our segments in our paper. So to do so, please be sure to subscribe to the Nichi Bei News at www.nichibei.org/subscribe. Next up, we connect with the lead organizer of the Los Angeles DOR, Matthew Wisely, also Educational Programs Manager at the National JACL, as he discusses their theme, A Legacy of Courage, Nikkei Women Persevering Through Incarceration and Beyond, and how Los Angeles honors the Day of Remembrance.
My first DOR was back when I was in college at USC about probably 8 or so years ago. I think they were just celebrating, I think maybe the 40th or the 35th anniversary then. So actually LA DOR, as of this year, is actually entering its 46th year, I think, if we did the math right. The first DOR was held back in 1979, right after the first Manzanar pilgrimage. And it was started off with some folks from that pilgrimage, as well as JCL and some other local leaders who really wanted to get it going. And then a few years after that, some other groups joined in, NCRR, Nikkei Progressives, and a few others. And ever since then, it's really been taking off from there. And more groups, as well as individual community members, have joined in over the years here and there. JANM's now a part of it, as well as a few other local community groups out here in Little Tokyo. So now it's really made by a whole coalition of folks in and around Little Tokyo. Yeah, and I think LADOR is one of those big events that really does bring Little Tokyo community together. I mean, on average, depending on the year, especially now that COVID's sort of come to an end, and prior to COVID, the numbers range from about 250. One year we were upwards of 500. So it really varies from year to year, but on average, we get about 300 or so participants, I'd say, that come to LADOR. Every year with DOR, our theme obviously centers around the incarceration experience, what happened to a lot of our families during the war. But what we really want to try and do each year with our theme is sort of bring about stories, experiences that are either, well, they're all relevant to what is happening today, but especially those that might not always be in the forefront, things that are either forgotten about or not as well documented. Or in this case, there's a lot of stories of women throughout Japanese American history, but especially during the camps, who did extraordinary and amazing things that might not be told in the history books or might not be known just because it was part of their everyday life. And I think it's something that all of us can relate to, since we all had mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, aunts, cousins, sisters, whoever it may be, who either went through the camp experience and went through a lot of these experiences during the war. And so I think that's why a lot of our members, this was actually, when we were coming up with this year's theme, actually, in our discussion, this was actually the first thing that was pitched, just because so many of us really thought that this was a fitting theme for the year. The biggest takeaways we want to have from this is, while we are going to highlight women leaders who were at the forefront, who were sort of in the spotlight, whether they necessarily wanted to be or not, I think the one thing we really wanted to focus on is that these experiences are something that everyone had during the war, and every family had to deal with. Mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, cousins, sisters, everybody sort of had to have these experiences. And that even though there are these stories and these experiences of these folks who were in the spotlight again, whether they like to be or not, that there's also these experiences that your family may have had, or that other people may have had, that might have been hidden or forgotten for one reason or another. And it's just a reminder that all of that legacy and all that they went through, all the sacrifices, hardships, and also the triumphs that they went through are still in us today, because that's how we got to where we are. And I think it really resonates, I think, with a lot of folks, because a lot of the hardships that people go through now, whether it's visible or invisible, we all go through those hardships. And a lot of folks go through different experiences that shape who we are, but also shape the next generation and shape our children, our grandchildren. Moved DOR this year over to LA Honpa Honganji, which most folks I think know as Nichi Bei Temple on First Street. So it'll be up on the JANM webpage under their events. Registration is free. It's first come, first serve on the day for registration, and then on the day of, as long as you're registered, it's first come, first serve for seating as well.
Many thanks to Matthew, as we hope to see him in person when Nichi Bei's Films of Remembrance travels to Southern California. More on that next month, so stay tuned. Next up, we share some noteworthy stories from the Community News Files. Director, roll 'em please.
Next is our News Bites, highlighting events over the past month or so, including stories from the pages of the Nichi Bei News. Let's roll the News Bites, please.
So let's roll the News Bites. The News Bites rolling. Mitsue Endo Tsutsumi was among 20 people who received the Presidential Citizens Medal, awarded to U.S. citizens for their exemplary deeds of service for their country or their fellow citizens, the White House said in a statement. Then President Joe Biden presented the recognition to the late Endo's son, Wayne Tsutsumi, on January 2nd. Endo was also inducted into the California Hall of Fame on December 19, 2024 by California Governor Gavin Newsom and first partner Jennifer Siebel. Attorney James Purcell represented Endo and others in their case, arguing the unconstitutional mass incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II without due process. 34-year-old Adina Ishii was sworn in December 5, 2024 as Berkeley's mayor. She beat Berkeley City Council member Sophie Han to become the city's first Asian American mayor. Ishii told the Nichi Bei News she is focused on addressing housing and homelessness, public safety, and infrastructure. The Golden State Warriors celebrated Japanese Heritage Night January 4th. They hosted Japanese player Yuki Kawamura, who did not play, and the Memphis Grizzlies, winning 121-113 at the Chase Center in San Francisco. Shirley Kazuyo Muramoto played the national anthem on koto. The Northern California Okinawan Kenjin-kai Eisa Shimadaiko also performed, as did Warriors dance team Gold squad members Mari and Nahoko. NBC Bay Area weekday traffic anchor Mike Inoue rang the bell. The Japanese Cultural and Community Center of Northern California, Japanese Community Youth Council, and API Legal Outreach hosted the annual Oshogatsu Matsuri, January 11th at the center in San Francisco's Japantown. The festivities included shikishi art, screen printing, an art contest, and a mochitsuki demonstration. Wesley United Methodist Church and UI Kai hosted their annual mochitsuki December 28, 2024 at the church in San Jose's Japantown. Volunteers steamed, pounded, and shaped the rice to make rice cakes in celebration of the new year. Japanese-American bassist Mark George Izu, 70, passed away surrounded by friends and family in San Francisco on January 12th due to complications from cancer. Izu played numerous instruments, including the Chinese sheng and the Japanese sho, and performed with Kent Nagano, James Newton, and Anthony Brown's Asian American Jazz Orchestra, among others. His wife and frequent artistic collaborator, Brenda Wong Aoki, said Izu wrote a soundtrack for Asian Americans over the years, including the music used during the video presentation of Sachs Kitashima's speech, played annually for the annual Bay Area Day of Remembrance. Izu's final project was providing music for Soul of the City, a production by Wong Aoki and others. Gene Wakatsuki Houston, whose pioneering book Farewell to Manzanar and its subsequent film introduced much of America to the story of the wartime incarceration of a people, died December 21, 2024 at her home in Santa Cruz, California, the Washington Post reports. She was 90 years old. Wakatsuki Houston and her family were unjustly imprisoned in the Manzanar concentration camp during World War II. Wakatsuki Houston and her husband James D. Houston teamed up with director John Cordy to write the screenplay for the film, which was nominated for an Emmy Award, won a Humanitas Prize for screenwriting, and was broadcast nationally in 1976 on NBC TV. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for our first episode of Season 4. We hope that you enjoyed what we, and of course all of our featured chefs, cooked up for the cafe menu today, featuring DOR events in our community. At this point, we want to give a big thanks to the Henry and Tomoe Takahashi Charitable Foundation for their continued support of the cafe. We're always appreciative of our collaboration with you in finding new ways to engage our Nikkei community. We would like to thank everybody for continuing to support our YouTube channel and hope that you enjoy our future content featuring our Japanese and Japanese American community. So please continue to support us by telling your friends, family, and loved ones to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like this episode, and comment down below. Now, to stay in the know of more happenings in the Japanese American community, please consider becoming a member of our Nichi Bei community to help support what we do here at www.nichibei.org/subscribe. Okay. Mitsuya. Great. Mitsue Endo Tsutsumi. Attorney General. Oh, Attorney James. Attorney General. What the fuck? Just a little bit. My tongue went on a hiatus and is not back yet. Northern California, Okinawan Kenji Kai. Is it Kenjin or Kenji? Wesley United Methodist Church and UI Kai hosted their, no. It's like immediately I screw up. Oh my God. Yeah, this is one of the ones where it's like, I'm gonna have to put Max through the ringer. I'm gonna have to put you through the ringer today. Next up, we share some noteworthy stories from the community. It's good. I love it.
I'm fine.
That's gotta be it, right?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Good job.